Grant Bosse. He's running for Congress. And he's up here to talk to you guys a little bit and answer some questions and just make sure that we are being respectful to him and keeping our heads up and the things away and not talking. Okay? And let's make sure that the questions that we're asking are appropriate questions. All right?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank Chief Mike for inviting me back up here. I came up through and he showed me around and I nearly broke my neck walking on the ice and dress shoes back in February. Weather's a little nicer today. I want to thank him for inviting me back to spend a couple of minutes with you guys. I want to thank you guys for your time. My name is Grant Bosse. I'm running for Congress. New Hampshire has 2 representatives in Congress, one for the southeastern part of the state, one for everywhere else. And I'm running in District 2, which is everywhere else. So Berlin, Keene, Hanover, Concord, Nashua, a little bit of Belknap County. I'm running in that district. If you're from Manchester, Portsmouth, Rochester, that part of the state, there's another race to represent you over there. And so about 500,000 people get together and they pick one of us to go down to Washington and be their voice on federal policy. We also have 2 members of the U.S. Senate. They both represent the state as a whole. In fact, I worked for 5 years for Senator John Sununu. He's up for re-election. Senators run every 6 years. So he's up again this year, and he's asking to be re-elected for another 6-year term. I left his office back in February to run for Congress myself. And this is my first time on the ballot. So I'm a first-time candidate. I'm learning as I'm doing it. I'm meeting a lot of people, and I'm telling them about my priorities and why I'd like to represent them in the U.S. House of Representatives. One of my big issues is with the economy, with healthcare, with education. No matter what issue it is, I see Congress making too many of those decisions for us. And I'd like to take some of that power and responsibility and move it from Washington, D.C. in one centralized location and move it back here to New Hampshire, to your families, to small businesses, to communities, so that they can make decisions for themselves. Particularly in the economy, which is pretty slow right now. It's tough finding a job, it's tough getting a job that pays well, it's really tough putting gas in the car. And as you're struggling, a lot of times the problems can be traced back to a bad decision that Congress made, a bad policy, a policy that made it harder to get a job, harder to start a business, harder to get gas from the field into your gas tank, and that's going to drive up the price. So instead of going down to Washington and promising that I'm going to solve your problems for you, I'm promising that I'm going to try to get Congress out of the way. And in a lot of ways, that's not as appealing, because it's just... I went to Hillsborough during high school, and I went to Dartmouth College. I was major in government. I also took a lot of history classes, really enjoyed history. And one thing I would recommend to everybody is take as many writing classes as possible. Learn how to write. It really is. If you can write well, you know you're going to think well. Because you can't write well unless you get your thoughts together. So it really, really helps. Learn how to write. And whether that's in a government class, a history class, an English class, a science class, writing is going to be the skill that's going to help you learn more. You're going to get more out of everything you learn inside the classroom and outside in the world. You're going to learn more if you know how to write. So definitely work on that every chance you can get. Probably government in college. As I said, I was a government major. I was actually kind of a math geek in high school. I don't know if it was my favorite subject. Probably social studies. I like history. I like learning what other people did, you know, and how we got to where we are now. We've got a great country. It's the best place to live in the history of the world. And every once in a while, I like to sit back and remember that. We've got problems. One area I'd like to change in our government is the way it spends money. I think it's spending too much money. And I think that makes it harder because ultimately they have to get the money from us as taxpayers. Or they can borrow the money, and we've seen them do that increasingly. They borrow the money, which means they're really getting it from you because they're going to have to pay it off in 20 years. You know, and typically you're going to be making more money in 20 years than you are as a teenager, and they're going to be coming after you as taxpayers to pay off the bills that we're running up now. So I think deficit spending, spending more money than we're taking in is a bad idea. I think Congress has a bad habit of trying to funnel money back to the district to show them, you know, we're bringing home the bacon. You might hear that phrase. I think that's the wrong way to go about it. I promise not to do that. That I will support broad programs if I think they're worthwhile, and I'll do it openly, and I'll be proud of that. But I won't try to come back and take credit because I brought a big pot of money to Nashville, or I brought a big part of money to Concord or to Colebrook. And that's through this process called earmarking. I would end earmarking. That's probably my top priority for what I changed down in Washington. Yes, sir. Most of them, huge Red Sox fan. Absolute huge Red Sox fan. Yeah. I got my presets on my radio set so that as we're driving around the state, I can get all the stations of the world champion Boston Red Sox. You're shaking your head like a Yankee fan. You're a Yankee fan, too? Sorry.
It's a die.
See, decisions have consequences. And when you root for front runners like A-Rod and Jeter. I was pretty into it. You know, when I first kind of got into it, I was 7 years old. I was in 2nd grade. And my dad took me out of school. So this was going to be a good day.
No school?
No school. He took me out of school in the afternoon, and we went down to Hillsborough, the Valley Inn in Hillsborough, New Hampshire, my hometown. And I met Ronald Reagan, who was running for president at the time in 1980. And got to shake his hand. He autographed a poster for me, and it was really cool. And then he won. And he was president from the time I was 7 years old to the time I was 15 years old. So, you know, pretty much by the end of his term, he was pretty much the only president I'd ever known. And I met him. And that's because New Hampshire has the first primary, the first election to decide who's going to be president, first in the nation primary. In fact, they take the very first votes in the country right down in Stewartstown, about 20 miles away.
Yep, at the Bosse. That's the first voting poll.
They get together at midnight on the day of the New Hampshire primary, which is the first primary in the nation. And everybody in town who's a registered voter shows up at midnight and casts their ballot. It's the only place where 100% of the registered voters actually vote. And that's pretty cool. Good question. I'm voting for John McCain. I'm a Republican, and he's our nominee. He's representing our party. And that's not a guarantee that, you know, not all Republicans are going to vote for the Republican nominee. Not all Democrats are going to vote for the Democratic nominee. Looks like it's going to be Senator Obama now. But my views of government, where I want to see the country going, is more in line with what John McCain's talking about than what Barack Obama's talking about. So I'm going to support John McCain. It's pretty sexy. It's a 2000 Saturn. Yeah, it's pretty hot. But it gets about 30 miles to the gallon, and it hasn't broken down in a while. So yeah, we drove it up here, made it up the road, so it'll get just about anywhere. I think it's important to be involved. I mean, we get to pick our own government. We get to pick the direction of our whole country. And, you know, you say, well, my vote's not going to change it, it's not going to make a difference. Sometimes it will. In the local election, it can come down to one vote. And in your involvement, your energy, your passion, if you help out a campaign, can really make a difference, convincing a lot of people to vote for your favorite candidate. And mostly, if you don't vote, you can't complain.